Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Our good friend Renato Mariotti is here. It has been quite a while since we spoke with the former federal prosecutor, CNN legal analyst, co-host of It's Complicated podcast, a man with many hats. Renato, how are you?
Well, I could be better. I think we all could be better at this point in time. I think that's fair to say.
Amen to that. A lot of people, I think, who voted for Donald Trump are now finding out that the program that they relied on or the promise they felt Republicans made to them, those are all turning out to be untruths. I had a soundbite from a Venezuelan woman in Florida who was talking about the TPS system where, for documented immigrants from Venezuela, they were given temporary protected status, which Donald Trump just did away with. And she was saying, we were betrayed. We were more than betrayed. Republicans promised us we would be safe. I seem to recall similar complaints the last time Donald Trump was president. I didn't think he'd come after the program I need. I didn't think he would come after my friends and family and colleagues and relatives. Dear God, it wasn't that long ago. Is this the new world we live in where no one remembers anything for any length of time?
Well, Joan, people, one thing that Donald Trump has banked on that has worked well for him is that he knows that he can flood the zone, so to speak, to use a football analogy, with all sorts of tactics and all sorts of wrongdoing, and he can count on the fact that people don't have the time to pay attention. There's a lot of people out there who have two jobs or have a whole bunch of kids, and they're juggling being a parent and being working to support their family, and they can only pay attention a little bit each day to what's going on in the news. And it's impossible for our news reporters to keep up with everything he's doing. I was talking with the New York Times journalist the other day. He told me even with their resources, they have more resources than anybody, they're having trouble keeping up with everything Trump's doing. And I think that's part of what's going on here, is that he's doing so much in such a short period of time that people can't even keep track of his wrongdoing.
Yeah. What Steve Bannon referred to in radio safe language as the poopification of the United States, the poopification of America, it's coming at us like a storm. There are so many executive orders, and there are so many executive orders that are blatant violations of the law. Are we going to just have to litigate, every move, every sneeze that Donald Trump makes? It feels that way.
Well, yeah. One thing that I think is really important for everyone to understand, Joan, before the election, a lot of us talked about autocracy and the threat that would come, the threat to democracy that would come from the election of Donald Trump. But it's important to realize that this is not like Donald Trump proclaiming himself king or becoming the head of a junta. What's happening is something that we've seen happen in other countries around the world. Poland, Hungary, Russia, countries where the democratic institutions started being subverted. And it wasn't a one-time process. It was like death by 1,000 cuts. And some of those countries, like Hungary, have slid into a sort of autocratic state. Others, like Poland, managed to recover. And some of the tools that we have to try to preserve our democracy are the courts. Because the courts, even if you don't win in the end, it brings sunlight on things. It draws attention to issues. You have judges who are going to ask questions, judges who are going to issue orders. And for now, it looks like the Trump administration is at least claiming that they're going to be complying with court orders. So that's a tool in a toolbox. Public opinion is another tool. Our conversations like we're having now is another. And ultimately going to the ballot box is the ultimate tool that we have to try to take back our democracy.
One of the things I'm worried about, though, is that Trump won't follow court rulings. You know, there was a ruling that the government freeze was going to be stayed. They're going to wait. The judge doesn't want it to take effect. And yet, you know, the day after the judge made that ruling, there were reports that a lot of agencies, Head Start agencies and other agencies, were still finding that their funds were still not coming. Their funds were frozen. Their access to the systems that they get those payments from was still cut off. You know, what if he takes that same attitude that we saw from President Andrew Jackson when the Supreme Court said that the Trail of Tears had to stop, and he was like, you know what? Let the Supreme Court enforce it if they can. We don't have a Supreme Court police force or even a federal court police force. We rely on people following the law, and I'm not quite sure why, since we have an extremely lawless president.
So I think that's a really important analogy that you brought up there, historical note you brought up there, Joan. At one point in our history, we did have a president who wanted to talk about defying the Supreme Court. That has not happened yet here, where you have Trump saying, to hell with the courts, let them enforce their rulings. I'm going to disregard their orders. You know, could that happen? It's possible. You could conceive of a world in which it happened, but it has not happened. What you're seeing right now is the Justice Department, under Trump's Attorney General and so on, going to court and answering these things and trying to make promises and asking for more time and so on and so forth. Now, are they always compliant with the orders? No. Have they made accurate statements in every instance of the courts? No, and they've been called out for that at times when, for example, they said that Musk's team didn't have read-write access to certain Treasury files, and it turned out they did. So, you know, right now, at least, what I see is the courts remaining a tool because Trump and his administration are at least going through the motions and saying that they are going to participate in and comply with the court processes. As long as they're willing to do that, that is an important tool to make sure the public knows what is happening, to make sure there's some independent body to go to. So I think that you mentioned at the top, Joan, is this something that we're going to have to litigate? Are we going to have to litigate everything, go to the courts for everything? The answer is, for right now, yes. There's going to have to be a fight whenever the laws are broken. And those fights are going to occur in federal court sometimes when affirmative lawsuits, let's say by the FBI agents who are trying to not get fired, not have their names released to the public, but also in courts here in the state of Illinois at times where there are lawsuits filed against our governor, our mayor, to try to prevent them from enforcing our own local laws.
What went through your mind as a lawyer who worked for the federal government when you see these efforts by the Trump administration? Well, we want to get rid of every lawyer at DOJ who had anything to do with any of the cases against Donald Trump. We want to purge the FBI. What goes through your mind when you read about that?
Yeah, it's a great question because the people that I worked with at the FBI, for example, some of the finest Americans who I've ever worked with. I mean, these are individuals, women, men, who devote decades of their life to serving the public, who go in harm's way to keep people safe, to investigate serious crimes, and essentially the Attorney General and the then acting Attorney General, who was the appointed Deputy Attorney General, was saying that every FBI agent who worked on a January 6th case, which is like 40% of the workforce, I think, of the FBI, are all subject to dismissal. And these are people who, in some cases, are a year or two from retirement, who could be losing the benefits that would come from serving until they retirement age. There are people for whom that's been their only job and their livelihood. And you could just imagine, Joe, what that does to the United States of America when our law enforcement is gutted, where what if there's a terrorist attack and suddenly the FBI is at half strength because we're engaged in this sort of political, cleansing that they're trying to do at the FBI. It's just very disheartening. And right now, what you have, and I'll just say, as somebody who's spoken to people in law enforcement, federal law enforcement, quite a bit over the last weeks, that there are federal prosecutors and FBI agents who are very afraid right now, afraid that they're going to lose their jobs, afraid of what they may be asked to do. Will they get reassigned to the border? Will they be asked to suddenly work on nothing but immigration cases? Will they be focused on prosecuting Jack Smith? Are they going to be in the Hamas task force focused on that? I mean, there's a lot to be concerned about if you work in federal law enforcement right now.
Well, and especially for some of the lawyers. I mean, lawyers at the federal level don't walk in and say, oh, by the way, you know what? I think I want to work on this case, and this case, but I don't want to work on that one, or that one. I mean, you're an employee. Somebody says to you, there's a January 6th case. We need you on it. That's what you do. It's not like I want this case because I hate Trump and I'm going to thwart him. Oh, my goodness.
I know. Well, most of the FBI agents supported Trump. And the crazy thing is there would be FBI agents who literally were just following orders, conducting interviews or helping prosecutors, execute a search warrant. And they're going to ultimately get caught up in this and be penalized for that. I mean, you currently have, by the way, the current U.S. attorney, interim U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, is investigating all of his own prosecutors in his own office because they all worked in January 6th cases. I mean, it is amazing, both in its incompetence, its harm to our country, its lawlessness, bad judgment. But there's a lot to be concerned about, and that's why I said in the beginning, Joan, that Trump is flooding the zone because there's so much happening all at once that it's hard to even keep track of it.
Yeah. You've said a couple of times, you've mentioned a couple of times, Renato, talking to various people who are involved in the thick of this right now. I'm not asking you to name names or anything like that, but tell me some of the things that have been shared with you.
Well, there are certainly, FBI agents who are very worried about their future, not knowing what to do. I can't get too much into the specifics of that, but there are a lot of FBI agents who are worried right now, just floods and floods of them, because you're talking about thousands of agents who were getting questionnaires and getting asked about their involvement in these cases and worried about their jobs and their futures. Federal prosecutors who now are dealing with the fact that the DOJ main justice, the leadership there doesn't necessarily support their mission and what they're doing. Prosecutors who are concerned because anyone who's not a permanent employee, and often in some of these agencies, it can be up to 2 years that you're a temporary employee, because once you're a permanent employee in the government, it can be harder to terminate you, that all of them may be automatically terminated. I mean, the Trump administration is looking at terminating every FBI agent who is temporary, every DOJ attorney temporary. There are all sorts of incoming lawyers who had foregone other employment at law firms and elsewhere to start their legal career after law school in the DOJ honors program, who now have no job. And suddenly we're told, well, you don't have a job anymore, even though they turned down all the other job offers that they had. There's just a lot of people who are very concerned right now for all sorts of different reasons. There's so much. There's so many people who are concerned for so many reasons that it is really a lot for me to keep track of, even as I am trying to do all of that.
Some of the FBI agents who've spoken with you, are they people who admitted to you that they voted for this guy? And do they now, I know they're afraid. Would you describe what they're feeling now as buyer's remorse?
I think they're just shocked. For a lot of them, I've not talked to them about who they voted for. That's a Trump almost thing to do, right? But I think that what I've done is that I think for most of them, they just never fathom that they're them doing their job and doing their duty, because these are pretty straight arrow type individuals.
Yeah, I know a lot of FBI agents. I know what they're like. It's like there's a mold that they come from.
For sure. And these people it's shocking. I mean, just little things that I have done to be helpful mean so much to them because they are lost. I mean, can you imagine, as an FBI agent, you're not used to having to seek out help. You're not used to being in a position where you're, for them, this isn't like they did something wrong and they're being disciplined. This is just everyone doesn't know what to do. They're used to being part of an organization that takes care of them. They know, the management, they'll take care of them. And, now they're basically, their management is being subverted. A lot of them are either been dismissed or under threat of being dismissed. They've been told that if they don't comply with certain directives in the Justice Department, that'll be grounds for their dismissal. It's a lot of very difficult choices being made right now within the FBI and the Justice Department. And, of course, that's just not even everything that's going on, right? Because we know that there's entire agencies like USAID that seem to be disappeared off the map. Elon Musk is in the Treasury Department with some random young men who are not government employees and accessing various things. Like I said, that there's lawsuits. All of your Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department is being co-opted to file lawsuits against our elected officials here in Illinois and Chicago, against our sanctuary city laws and sanctuary state laws. So just a lot. There's just a lot of battles in this war right now.
I know a lawyer who works at a big firm in Washington, D.C., and apparently a lot of the big firms based in D.C., their employees, they'll work a few years at the firm, then they'll take a government job, DOJ or something else, and then they come back to their firm, and this has sort of been the flow. And what I've heard is that so many lawyers are either being forced out or quitting, that there's now this flood of lawyers, and the effect it's having is that some of the younger associates, which you and I know how law firms work, and generally it's the younger associates who do the bulk of the work on the cases that they're hearing, in part because they charge less per hour and the client gets a break, but also they do a lot of the work. And my friend has been saying that a lot of the associates are leaving. They're finding other jobs. They are leaving D.C. entirely because the basic career path that they saw themselves on has now evaporated. Plus, they have all these, 1,000+ lawyers who are in D.C. and are now looking for work. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I will say, as a lawyer, I practice in Chicago, not in D.C., but there are a lot of resumes now flooding the works here. I mean, just tons and tons of lawyers looking to leave the administration, and they're really in a difficult position. Usually when you leave an administration, there's obviously changes like this, but usually there's a certain group of political appointees who leave. But here, tons of career employees are now being, leaving. A lot of them voluntarily because they don't want to deal with any of this, or they're being asked to do things they disagree with, or they're being, asked to do things that don't work for them. For example, the Justice Department now is 100% in office, right? And for some people that, they had constructed their life around being able to be home with their kids certain days a week. Mm-hmm. So
now their workday is longer because they have a commute. They have to find child care and they have to pay for it. There's a good deal.
Yeah, well, so for people, my point is all of those people, there's a lot of people on the margins who are just like, I don't want to be suing sanctuary cities, so I'm going to leave. Or I don't want to be reassigned to working on the border and working on immigration cases, so I'm going to leave. Or I'm now being demoted, even though I'm not a political appointee because I am perceived to disagree with the agenda. I don't want to be demoted, so I'm leaving. I can't be in the office 5 days a week, so I'm leaving. And all of those people add up, along with all the typical political appointees who are leaving, to just create a flood of resumes out in the street. And so, it's hard for those people to find jobs. It certainly is a trickle-down effect. But, right now, I think we're all waiting to see how this all shakes out. I mean, if you take what the Attorney General put out on those 14 memos seriously, there's going to be very vastly different priorities for the Justice Department. And it's not clear, how much of that is to send some sort of public statement and how much of it's real. I mean, are they going to still prosecute Foreign Corrupt Practices Act cases? Are they going to really be devoting a lot of resources to investigating what Hamas was doing? I mean, it's hard to know how much that's going to be a reality. So a lot is up in the air.
Renato, thank you so much. It is always so much fun to talk with you. Thank you for taking time on this Friday to join us.
Thank you. My pleasure.